So this book takes an in-depth look at the sport of Greco-Roman wrestling. Hi guys, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel, Fighting Words, the Martial Arts Library. And on this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. The subject of today's book review is going to be Greco-Roman Wrestling by William Martel, published in 1993. Now, William Martel has spent a lot of time in the American school system teaching Greco-Roman wrestling. He was part of the coaching squad for both the 92 and 96 Olympic teams, so he definitely knows his material, and I think this book does a good job of displaying that. The first chapter of the book goes briefly over the history of Greco-Roman wrestling in the United States. So for those who are unfamiliar, Greco-Roman wrestling is an Olympic style of wrestling. It's pretty well practiced internationally. Despite what the name suggests, it does not actually trace its roots back to ancient Greece or ancient Rome. Instead, it actually has its origins in France, roughly 200 or 300 years ago. Anyway, so he does cover the short history of Greco-Roman in the United States. He then spends a lot more of that chapter making a case for the skills that are utilized in Greco-Roman wrestling and how they can be beneficial to folk-style wrestling, which is practiced at the scholastic level in the United States. Now, one of the interesting points about Greco-Roman wrestling is the lack of use of the legs. This means that there are no foot sweeps. This means that you cannot grab and pick up the legs. This means that if the guy's on the ground and you're trying to turn them over, you cannot hook the leg in order to do that. Pretty much anything below the waist is off limits. Now, obviously that colors the approach to the techniques that he includes in here. Chapter 2 is where we get our first look at some of these techniques, and it includes stance and movement, as most good martial arts books will start with. And it's notable that this particular stance is going to be a more upright wrestling stance than you would typically see from American folk-style wrestling or freestyle wrestling, which is an international sport that both allow attacks to the legs. In this chapter, he also goes over the different elements of throwing, including the different control points, both the primary control points and the secondary control points on the body that are used for throws used in Greco-Roman wrestling. So you'll notice on this chart, these are the primary control points. Most of them are on the torso. You notice that control point number 1 is actually the space between the legs. So for anyone who is into throws and takedowns, you'll know that there's this principle that the human body is a 3-legged milking stool with one leg missing. So if you can control the point between the legs, you can throw the guy easier. You'll also notice on the secondary control points, most of those are on the outside of the body, most of them are on the arm. These are still utilized in setting up and executing throws. Now, he also goes over some fundamental control positions and how to transition between those, as well as techniques for off-balancing the opponent, which is a key element in throwing, as well as pummeling, which is transitioning between different control methods in the clinch position. Chapter 3 is more of an overview of tactics and techniques of Greco-Roman wrestling. He takes a look at being defensive versus counterattacking, covers defense versus some basic attacks like being lifted, like being put in a front headlock, defenses against the 2-on-1s, defense against pins. And I would say in this chapter, the front headlock, or what he calls the head and arm, get the most attention. The front headlock in this context is controlling the head and one arm. And we do get a lot of that. I don't think controlling the head by itself is legal in this particular style of wrestling. Now, The next chapter, chapter 4, covers different body attacks, or what we might call body lock attacks. One of the highlights of this, it's a brief section, but he goes over the different types of gripping that one can do around the opponent's body, and he covers how that type of grip will have an effect on how the opponent's body is moved. Out of all the other books I have, I think the only other book that I have that covers anything about this, like how the grip changes your effect on the opponent, would be Anderson Silva's book on the clinch. So again, it's a little part in this, but I also think it's a very important part and shouldn't be overlooked. After that, we get a lot on the chest-to-chest style of clinch wrestling that Greco-Roman is known for. We get techniques like the slide-by. We get a lot of different body lock attacks, such as the sag throw, duck unders, things like that. We get offense from the double underhooks, which is having both arms under the opponent's armpit, and the over-under position, which is where you and your opponent each have one arm under the opponent's armpit and the other arm goes over, under, over. And the back half of that chapter is how to use / counter your opponent's position from that body lock style of attack in order to get a throw or counter of your own. Chapter 5 is on arm throws, and this includes starting with how to expose the arm for attack. In other words, how to get control of the arm, how to get it extended so that you can begin your attack. And most of the throws here will be familiar with those who practice things like judo. They resemble makikomi throws a lot of times, sort of the wraparound throws. We also get a salto in here. So you're technically attacking the arms, but basically this is an overhead throw when someone goes to get a body lock around you. Chapter 6 is on the hidden arm position. That includes the front headlock position. It also includes a lot of side headlock throw variations. Some of which sometimes you're sagging, sometimes you're twisting in the other direction. There are some interesting throws from the head control position. There's a variation of the fireman's carry, which is traditionally done with a leg grab. Can't do that in Greco-Roman. You can't attack the legs. So he has a modified version where you still have a hook around the head, and you go under and sort of use your forearm as leverage to pull the guy over the top. But yeah, this is all things controlling the head and tossing the guy, including sort of a head and arm suplex that looks a bit like judo's rice bale throw. Chapter 7 is on parterre, or ground wrestling. This, I will say, has the least amount of translation to other combat sports. Because of the rules of Greco-Roman wrestling, a lot of what goes into this particular area of ground fighting is one guy will try to pancake himself out, just flatten himself out, and the other guy will usually go for various lifts and gut wrenches. And actually, gut wrenches get a lot of attention. You will also see the reverse lift, better known as the Karelin lift, in here. I don't think he refers to it as that, though. With that being said, toward the end of the chapter, you do get some more classical wrestling style turnovers like Nelsons and cross faces. Again, because it's a Greco-Roman setting, it's against an opponent who's flattened out, and you are not utilizing any leg grabs in order to get that turnover accomplished. Now, the final chapter is on drills and conditioning, and I think this works out great for having a Greco-Roman program, but I also think that if you practice another martial arts program optimally a grappling-based one, this can also be a tremendous help. He includes a number of drills to get wrestlers used to getting that back arch that Greco-Roman wrestling is known for. The back arch is sort of a hip throw, but in reverse. Instead of loading the guy onto your rear hip, you're loading him onto the front of your hip and then arching, taking him over the top. And he has a number of drills that can take a wrestler from the most supported to the least supported. So you go progressively from, okay, I'm arching back over something that's supporting my back, to I'm just holding on to a guy's hand so that I don't hit my head as I arch back until I get comfortable with that motion. And he has a number of conditioning drills. Most of them are weights. He's got dumbbell and barbell exercises for building strength. Also has a running program that alternates jogging, sprints, and distance running. There's also quite a span of training schedules, anything from 7 days to a 4-year program if you were trying to get into the Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling. And finally, we finish with a glossary and an index, which I'm a big fan of, because that means anything you have a question about, you can flip to the back and look it up. As far as the pros go, as I mentioned, the gripping section, it's brief. It barely covers half a page, but I think it's just a very small highlight of the whole program. This is something that I don't think too many people put too much thought in, like how changing your grip changes the direction of force that you can generate. So for me, that was a real highlight of this book. The training and the drills is excellent. Especially the section getting you used to performing that back arch. He devotes a lot of different drills to that. Really highlighting the importance of that action in Greco-Roman wrestling. And when it comes to that techniques, all of them tend to have a pretty in-depth description of what's going on in them, which is another good point. As far as the cons go, there were parts of it I thought could be a little bit better organized. Well, for me, I might have organized it a little bit differently. I wonder how much of that is the way I'm personally reading it. Maybe it wouldn't be optimized for somebody else. But a few things did stick out. That was one of them. Why are we covering defenses to techniques that we haven't covered yet in the beginning? That would be something that would stand out. Outside of that, I think there were some techniques that kind of got glossed over a little bit that probably deserved their own full-page description. But I think that was rare. So it's really hard to come up with cons on this book. It's sort of limited, but it does very well in what it sets out to do. Who would I recommend this to? Definitely if you want to compete in Greco-Roman wrestling, or train a team in Greco-Roman wrestling. Probably not the be-all, end-all, but this is definitely a good reference for specific drills, for training periodization, for specific techniques. I think if you are in a grappling sport where you will find yourself in a chest-to-chest clinch, in a front headlock clinch, this has a lot of ideas for high-amplitude throws. This has a lot of ideas for how to maneuver oneself within the clinch and utilize the opponent's movements to get a better clinch position. We've seen in mixed martial arts the hybrid clinch that they have developed, a lot of it owes itself to the Greco-Roman wrestlers, a lot of them from Team Quest, Couture, Henderson, Lindland. I do wonder if you come from a judo background, and perhaps if you are trying to translate some of your skills to a no-gi situation, whether the clinch drills and some of the control ideas might fit into your particular game. Overall, I think it's tremendously helpful for a certain segment of the population. Um, I, being a martial arts channel, we have to address self-defense. I don't really think that there's a whole lot here for that. I think some of the clinching and control skills could help, but overall, I mean, dude, if you can toss somebody on your head over your head on the street, more power to you. It's probably overkill for most situations. Um, but yeah, for Greco guys or adjacent grappling arts, I think this is a really good book for that. And anyway, that's all I have for this week, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching.